Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity for presenting my paper on gender inequality and the East-West divide in contraception. So first, a little context. In this paper, we look at contraception from two different angles. On the one hand, we look at contraception in terms of effectiveness. We distinguish between four broad categories. So we look at people using no method, those using natural family planning, in our study withdrawal or the rhythm method, those using the so-called reversible modern methods, historically not really accurate, but it's called that way in the literature. We refer to these methods as the male condom, pills, morning after pills, implants, IUDs, and all such methods. And finally, we have the people who are sterilized. From a different angle, we also look at contraception in terms of a gender division. So the idea is to look which of the partners, the male or the female partner, actually uses the method. In general, as you can see in the figures, there's quite some variation across European regions in contraceptive behavior. In this presentation, we will look at the so-called East-West divide. So in Western Europe, we see lower prevalences of less effective methods and higher prevalences of more effective methods as compared to in the Eastern and Central European countries. As concerns the gender division of contraception, we see lower prevalence of male method use in Western Europe and higher prevalence of female method use. So when we look in literature, we often see that scholars assume that there will be a linear transition from using less effective to more effective methods. It is also often assumed that these less effective methods are a misinformed or uninformed choice, a more irrational choice, even a more traditional choice. However, the high prevalence of natural family planning in Central and Eastern European countries suggests that there might be other factors at play, because these people often do not see their own behavior as irrational or traditional or misinformed. So therefore, we suggest that contraception might also be perceived as a social practice in addition to the effectiveness factor. And in our paper, we followed previous research. In Europe, this research is rather limited, that explicitly links the lack in modern contraceptive use to a lack in female empowerment. We looked at three research questions, and it's important to note that we looked at gender inequality at three different levels: the individual level, the couple level, and the country level. So first, we looked at the impact of gender inequality on the effectiveness of contraception. Second, we looked at the impact of gender inequality on the gender division of contraception. And finally, we looked whether the gap between the eastern and western part in Europe could be explained by these differences in gender inequality at different levels. I don't have the time to go into detail into previous findings, but in general, we hypothesized based on this previous literature that using no method, using natural family planning and sterilization, and using no method and male methods would be associated with higher levels of inequality. The data we used is a combination of the Generations and Gender Survey and the Demographic Health Surveys. We used a subsample of women of reproductive age who have a partner, who are not pregnant or infertile, and whose partner is also not infertile, and who have no desire for children. The dependent variable is, not surprisingly, contraceptive use, so we distinguish on the one hand between effectiveness in contraception, so the blue methods, and for the second dependent variable, we combined all female methods and all male methods across the different categories for the gender division. The independent variables, so we controlled for a whole bunch of variables, but concerning gender inequality, at the individual level, we looked at women's socioeconomic status. We measured it according to her educational level and employment status. At the couple level, we looked at her relative educational status and employment status. So we compared the women's educational status with her partners and also for employment status. And at the country level, we looked at the gender inequality index. A higher score refers to higher levels of inequality. The method, I won't go into detail, but we use multinomial logistic multi-level model, so we control for the clustering of the sample in different countries. Our results, so let me first explain the idea behind the bar chart. So these are the odds ratios. A value below 1 is a negative relationship, a value above 1 is a positive relationship. The blue bars are the significant effects and the gray bars are the insignificant effects. So, concerning the first research question, we look at the impact of gender inequality on the effectiveness of contraception, and this graph shows you the comparison between using no contraception and using modern methods. So as you can see, women's individual level suggests that a lower socioeconomic status is associated with a higher likelihood of using no contraception. So being lower or middle educated as compared to being higher educated, and being not employed instead of being employed shows higher likelihood of using no contraception. As concerns the couple level, we rather find the heterogamy effect instead of a gender inequality effect. So heterogamous couples in terms of employment status, the woman is employed and the man is not, or the other way around, the man is employed and the woman is not, as compared to couples with the same employment status. These heterogamous couples also show higher likelihoods of using no contraception. And finally, at the country level, we see that higher levels of inequality are also associated with higher levels of non-use. Similar results, largely similar results for natural family planning. So again, a lower socioeconomic status at the individual level and at the country level are associated with higher levels of natural family planning. At the couple level, for natural family planning, we do find a gender inequality effect, so only couples in which the man is employed and the woman is not, so the woman has a lower relative employment status, are more likely to use natural family planning. The final part of the first research question concerns sterilization. So largely similar results to the previous charts, except for this one. The country level seems to not impact on the likelihood of using sterilization. For the second research question, I will only show you the graph for male versus female method use because non-use is largely similar to the first chart. So we only see that women's employment status, both at the individual level as at the couple level, is significantly related to higher likelihood of using male methods with female methods. And again, at the country level, higher inequality is associated with higher use of male methods instead of female methods. The final research question looks whether we can explain the East-West gap by looking at differences in gender inequality, and it seems that particularly the contextual level, so the country level, can explain part of the gap. So as concerns no method use or male method use, we see that this gap between Western Europe and Eastern Europe disappears if we include the GII in the model. For natural family planning, we find that the gap remains irrespective of looking for these differences, although the gaps significantly weakens when looking at the country level of gender inequality. Finally, the discussion. So it's important to note two limitations of the study. First of all, we did not take an income measure into account, which is a significant limitation, but the income measure between the demographic health surveys and the gender and generation surveys is not comparable, so we couldn't take it into account. We did not take into account cultural values because we think it would be mainly important at the higher levels, but because of the limited number of countries, we couldn't methodologically take it into account. And finally, we kind of controlled in a way for access by using type of residence as a proxy, but we are aware that this is far of a perfect measure, but for now it's the only thing that we have. So in conclusion, I think that our study indicates the importance of looking at gender inequality at different levels. Gender inequality manifests in many aspects and many levels of women's lives. So it's important to look further than only at the individual level or the country level. And we can conclude that higher levels of gender equality relate to higher use of female methods and higher use of more effective but reversible methods. Thank you for your attention.